I want you to take a moment and just think about a phrase we hear and probably say all the time.
Okay.
It's this idea of, I wish you everyday happiness. We put it in birthday cards, we write it in emails, we say it at weddings.
Right. It's a standard sign-off.
Exactly. It's a beautiful sentiment, right? It sounds so simple. But here is where we need to start unpacking this concept today. Because the more you look at the reality of human existence, the more that phrase starts to look like an impossible demand.
It really does.
Statistically speaking, based on the research we've pulled for today's deep dive, an estimated 98% of people cannot actually achieve that state of everyday happiness.
98%.
98%. When you hear a number like that, it forces you to pause. Why is it so incredibly hard to just be happy? Why does it feel like we're constantly swimming upstream against our own minds?
Well, that is the exact question that brings us here, and it really gets to the very core of the human experience. We have a tendency in modern society to treat happiness like it should be our default setting.
Yeah, like it's owed to us.
Exactly. We treat it like it's something we should naturally fall into if everything in our lives is just going okay.
Yeah.
That the bills are paid, we're relatively healthy. We assume joy should just seamlessly fill the space.
But it doesn't.
It doesn't. And the reality, which is what we're going to explore in a lot of depth today, is that your brain is quite literally not designed for everyday happiness.
Wow.
It is not a malfunction that you feel anxious or dissatisfied. It is the machine operating exactly as it was built to.
Which I have to admit sounds incredibly depressing at first glance.
I know, it does.
If you're listening to this right now and feeling a bit deflated by that, I just want to say, stay with us. Because the more we look at the massive stack of research we've compiled for this deep dive, the more empowering this realization actually becomes.
Absolutely.
We have gathered some truly eye-opening psychological studies. We're talking landmark, paradigm-shifting research from Harvard University and the University of Sussex, alongside some profound literature on a concept called self-affirmation.
And our mission today is to completely deconstruct those biological and psychological traps, the ones that keep you feeling stuck, anxious, or just mildly, persistently dissatisfied with your life.
Right. And more importantly, we're going to give you the science-backed and honestly sometimes completely counterintuitive methods to bypass your own biology.
We're going to talk about how to build a sense of self-worth that is absolutely bulletproof. But to do that effectively, we need to approach this methodically. I want us to take our time today. The pacing of this is important.
Yeah, we're not going to rush through this.
Right. We cannot start throwing solutions at a problem we don't fully understand. Before we can start fixing the problem of unhappiness, we have to understand the machinery we're operating.
The human brain.
The human brain. We have to look at the evolutionary blueprints of our minds. Because once you understand the profound biological why behind your negative emotions, a fundamental shift happens.
You stop blaming yourself.
Exactly. You stop viewing a random Tuesday afternoon wave of anxiety as a personal failing, and you start to see it for what it actually is, ancient biological programming running its script.
So let's dive right into that biological programming, because the very first core concept we pulled from our slices is a tough pill to swallow, but it's the foundation of everything else we'll discuss.
The baseline state of humans is not happiness.
Right. I want you, the listener, to visualize this for a second. Think about animals in nature, out in the wild.
Okay.
If you watch a high-definition nature documentary, you almost never see them displaying what we would call joy or carefree happiness.
No, you don't.
What are the primary emotions you see? A zebra, a gazelle, or even an apex predator like a lion displaying? It's vigilance.
Yes.
It's a sudden spike of anger. It's fear. It's the aggressive display of a threat to protect territory. They're constantly on edge, their ears twitching, eyes scanning the horizon.
And if we connect this observation to the broader picture of evolutionary biology, the why becomes glaringly obvious. Happiness does not keep you alive in the wild.
Fear does.
Fear does. If an animal is completely relaxed, joyously bounding through the savanna without a single care in the world, completely oblivious to the rustling in the tall grass,
That animal is going to be eaten.
it is going to be eaten.
Yeah.
It will not survive to pass on its genetic material. Our brains, much like the brains of those animals on the savanna, are evolutionary survival machines.
Right.
They have been brutally and efficiently honed over millions of years for one singular, overriding purpose, keeping you breathing until tomorrow. And to achieve that survival, your brain has to function as a relentless threat detection engine. continually scanning the environment for anything that might hurt you.
Which brings us to a really incredible piece of research that illustrates just how relentless this engine is.
The 2010 study.
Yes, from two psychologists at Harvard University. They conducted this pivotal study to peer into the daily, moment-to-moment operating status of the human mind.
They wanted to know what our brains are actually doing as we go about our mundane daily routines.
Exactly. And to figure this out, they used a custom smartphone app to ping thousands of people at random intervals throughout the day. The app would just ask, what are you doing? What are you thinking about? And how do you feel?
And the data they got back was staggering.
It really was. They found that humans spend about 47% of their waking hours engaged in what they called mind wandering.
Think about the magnitude of that percentage. Almost half of our conscious waking lives.
Half. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around. Almost half the time you're awake, you are daydreaming, zoning out, or your mind is just entirely decoupled from the physical task in front of you.
You could be commuting on the train or washing the dishes.
We're sitting in a highly important corporate meeting and your mind is just completely somewhere else. You're physically present, but cognitively, you have left the building.
And here's where we find the crucial, slightly terrifying twist in their findings. When your brain is unfocused, when you aren't actively giving it a specific, demanding task to concentrate on, it doesn't just quietly power down into a peaceful standby mode.
It doesn't become a Zen garden.
No, it shifts into a specific neural network that neuroscientists refer to as the default mode network. I want to give you a way to visualize this. Imagine the default mode network as a highly caffeinated, incredibly bored security guard.
Oh, I love this analogy.
He's working the night shift in a completely empty, locked-down warehouse. Now, because there is no actual danger happening and he has nothing to engage his attention, what does he do?
He starts hallucinating shadows.
Exactly. He starts imagining elaborate heist scenarios. He convinces himself that the normal creaking of the pipes is a team of intruders. He does this just to keep himself alert, justified, and engaged.
Wow.
When your brain is idle, that paranoid watchman takes over the control room. Because of our evolutionary wiring, the default mode network immediately starts predicting danger.
It starts imagining worst-case scenarios about your health, your finances, your relationships.
It starts chewing on past regrets, replaying arguments from 5 years ago, or projecting future anxieties about things that haven't even happened yet.
This perfectly explains what we call the idle time paradox. Let's make this intensely real for a second, because I know every single person listening to this has experienced it.
Go ahead.
Think about your own life, especially in our modern, hyper-connected world. You work incredibly hard all week. You're dealing with emails, deadlines, commuting, managing family logistics.
You're stressed to the absolute limit.
And all you want, the only thing you crave, is a day off. You tell yourself, if I could just log off on Friday night, wake up on Saturday, sit on my couch, and do absolutely nothing, I'll be the happiest person on earth.
But then Saturday morning finally arrives.
You sit on the couch, you stare at the wall, you have zero obligations, and within 20 or 30 minutes, what actually happens?
A strange, creeping sensation of anxiety washes over you.
Yes. A sense of nameless dread sets in. Or you start feeling inexplicably unhappy and restless. You are doing exactly what you desperately wanted to do, nothing, and it feels absolutely awful.
It feels awful because idleness is biologically interpreted by your brain as a dangerous vulnerability. When you are sitting still and doing nothing, your brain interprets that as an opportunity to aggressively scan for threats.
So it spins up the security guard.
Exactly. When you are busy at work during the week, your cognitive resources are fully tied up. The working memory of your brain is occupied with the spreadsheet in front of you or the complex conversation you're having.
The security guard is busy checking actual IDs at the door.
Right, so he doesn't have time to imagine shadows. This biological reality actually explains a psychological phenomenon we see all the time in high-pressure environments. Why workaholics often report feeling happier or at least more emotionally stable in the short term than people who have vast amounts of unstructured free time.
Because staying constantly busy forces the brain to remain focused on external stimuli. It actively prevents it from slipping back into that default, internally focused, threat-predicting state.
Precisely.
So if we look at the data, what does this all mean for you, the listener? The takeaway here is absolutely not that you shouldn't rest. Rest is vital for physical recovery and preventing burnout.
But unfocused rest.
Right. Pure, unstructured idleness, where your brain is left entirely to its own devices with no direction, that is biologically dangerous for your mood. It's a trap that will reliably lead to anxiety.
If you want to truly relax and recharge over the weekend, engaging in a focused hobby is exponentially better for your psychological well-being than doing nothing.
Gardening, knitting, building a complex model airplane, painting.
Even doing a challenging crossword puzzle. These activities are the sweet spot. They occupy the brain's processing power just enough to keep it engaged and lock out the default mode network, but they aren't tied to the high-stakes stress of your professional work.
You're handing your brain a safe, constructive chew toy so that it doesn't start chewing on your own peace of mind.
You're giving the security guard a crossword puzzle so he stops staring at the monitors looking for ghosts.
I love that.
But this idle threat detection system is only the first layer of the biological trap we're caught in. Even when we are actively engaged in the world, we have to contend with another massive evolutionary hurdle, which psychologists call the negativity bias.
Oh, the negativity bias. This is huge. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it in your daily life.
It dictates a rather depressing 80-20 rule of how we experience life.
Right. This is the brain's deeply innate structural tendency to instantly latch onto bad news, negative feedback, or potential threats, and completely systematically ignore the good news.
Think about social media algorithms or the layout of trending news sites.
Oh, they are entirely deliberately built to exploit this exact biological flaw. If your day or even your whole life is 80% positive, you have a roof over your head, you're healthy, your friends love you, and 20% negative, your brain will allow that 20% of negativity to completely and overwhelmingly dominate your attention.
It's fundamentally an issue of cognitive weight. In the processing centers of the brain, a negative experience carries vastly more weight, more neural real estate, and more chemical resonance than a positive experience of the exact same magnitude.
Let me give you a scenario that I think will resonate perfectly with anyone who has ever worked in a corporate environment.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine it's the day of your annual performance review. You sit down with your manager and they go through a list of 10 key metrics. On 9 out of those 10 metrics, you were rated as exceeding expectations.
Glowing praise.
Exactly. Your boss praises your leadership, your punctuality, your creativity, your teamwork. It is a phenomenal review. But on the 10th metric, they say, you just need a little bit of improvement on your response time to emails.
Just a mild piece of constructive criticism.
Right. When you leave that meeting and get into your car to drive home, what are you thinking about? Are you basking in the glow of the 9 spectacular compliments? No. You are gripping the steering wheel, hyperventilating slightly, obsessively replaying the one mild criticism, wondering if your job is in jeopardy. A single minor negative event will completely hijack a profoundly positive day.
And again, we have to look at the historical and evolutionary mismatch here to understand why we are so irrational. Why does the brain discard 9 compliments to fixate on one minor criticism?
Why?
Because in prehistoric times, this hypersensitivity to negativity was not a flaw. It was a non-negotiable requirement for staying alive. If you were a hunter-gatherer foraging on the plains, ignoring a beautiful, breathtaking sunset had absolutely zero consequences. You just missed a nice view.
But ignoring a slight rustling in the bush because you optimistically assumed it was just the wind.
That could mean a predator. That could be lethal.
Yeah.
The biological cost of missing a positive cue is 0. The biological cost of missing a negative cue is death. We are the genetic descendants of the most paranoid, anxious, hypervigilant humans who ever lived upon the earth. The relaxed, optimistic ones who assumed the rustling bush was just the wind. They didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes.
So we inherited the operating system of a paranoid survivor. That is such a profound way to look at it. It completely reframes how we should view our own anxiety.
We did inherit that system.
Yeah.
But the tragedy of the modern human condition is that today we subconsciously apply this deeply ingrained life or death operating system to modern, completely non-lethal stressors.
Like the email from the boss.
Exactly. Your brain's amygdala, the fear center, cannot effectively distinguish between a literal tiger leaping out of the bushes and an ambiguous email from your boss that says, "Can we chat in my office later?"
The chemical cascade is the same.
Yes. The cortisol, the adrenaline, the spike in heart rate, the sudden feeling of dread. It's the exact same physiological response. We're reacting to social and professional friction as if it were a mortal threat.
I want to just pause here for a second to really let the listener sit with everything we've just uncovered. Let's synthesize this. Between our evolutionary wiring that prioritizes fear and vigilance over joy, the fact that our idle minds automatically drift toward imagining catastrophic disasters, and our innate negativity bias that forces us to obsess over the one bad thing that happened today while ignoring the 99 good things.
The odds are objectively scientifically stacked against us.
They really are, and I want you to hear this clearly. It is completely normal that you find it hard to be happy. You are not broken. You are fighting against millions of years of highly effective survival-oriented biology.
But as we dig deeper into our source material, we find there is another, perhaps even more complex layer to this unhappiness. It's not just our raw biology.
It's deeply psychological, and it's intrinsically tied to how we view our own value in the modern world.
Yes. To understand this psychological layer, the research points us toward a very specific, highly illuminating historical and cultural turning point. In the 1990s, sociologists and psychologists in Japan began observing a deeply concerning, totally counterintuitive phenomenon.
Tell us about that.
This was a period following massive, unprecedented economic growth. It was the era of the bubble economy. The country was experiencing an explosion of prosperity, technological innovation was booming, living conditions were incredibly comfortable, luxury goods were accessible, and the middle class was thriving.
Okay, so on paper, the golden age.
Exactly. And yet, paradoxically, as the wealth of the nation peaked, the youth suicide rates began to rise sharply.
The friction between the external data and the internal human experience there is completely jarring. It defies traditional socioeconomic logic. You'd look at the environment and think, the economy is booming, unemployment is low, people have money, safe homes, the latest technology, they should be absolutely thrilled with their lives.
But they weren't. In fact, an entire demographic was in profound life-ending distress. Researchers pored over the data for years, desperately trying to isolate the variable that was causing this despair.
They looked at physical health metrics, pockets of hidden poverty.
Right. They looked at access to basic needs, but none of the traditional indicators of societal distress were flashing red. Eventually, they discovered a missing psychological ingredient, a term that became absolutely central to understanding not just the Japanese crisis, but modern global unhappiness as a whole.
And that term is self-affirmation, or in simpler, more accessible terms, self-love.
The researchers realized that despite being wealthy, well-educated, and physically secure, an entire generation felt that their existence had absolutely no inherent value.
I want to spend some time defining this term carefully because self-affirmation sounds like one of those soft, fuzzy buzzwords you might read on a bumper sticker or a cheesy motivational poster.
It does, but it's very rigorous.
Right. In the context of the psychological sources we're examining, it is a deeply rigorous, structurally vital concept. Self-affirmation is the absolute, unconditional acceptance and appreciation of oneself.
It encompasses everything: your physical looks, your spirit, your quirky personality traits, and your behavior.
It's the profound, unshakable ability to look at yourself in the mirror, flaws and all, and genuinely say, I am satisfied with who I am right now. I have a fundamental right to exist exactly as I am without needing to prove my worth to anyone.
What is truly fascinating and deeply concerning about this concept is how directly the 1990s Japanese phenomenon applies to the life of the average listener today. That historical moment perfectly mirrors the global psychological landscape we see right now.
It explains why today's youth, or honestly, professionals of any age working in major cities, can have all their basic material needs met, have access to endless entertainment and food, yet still lack motivation.
Or feel deeply and chronically burnt out. Or experience a persistent low-grade depression that they can't quite articulate.
The root cause is not their external circumstances. They aren't depressed because their apartment is small or their car is old. It's a fundamental internal lack of self-worth.
If you do not have a baseline of self-affirmation, you physically cannot feel joy because you fundamentally, subconsciously believe you are unworthy of experiencing it. The mechanism for joy is broken.
And according to the extensive research we're looking at, there are three main killers of this self-affirmation. There are three specific mechanisms that actively, daily drain your self-worth battery down to zero.
We need to unpack them because recognizing them is the first step to stopping them.
The first killer identified in the literature is past failures.
This refers to the psychological accumulation of setbacks. Let's be clear, we all fail. Failure is a statistical inevitability of attempting literally anything in life, whether it's a new job, a relationship, or learning a language.
But the danger arises when a person experiences continuous setbacks. Or, more accurately, when their negativity bias forces them to fixate on those setbacks.
Exactly. They begin to replay their failures like an endless, high-definition highlight reel in their mind at 2 in the morning. When this happens, it systematically erodes their baseline belief in their own competence.
They start to internalize the failure. The narrative subtly, dangerously shifts from, I failed at this specific isolated task to
Now, I am a failure as a fundamental human being.
that internal shift from an action to an identity is so dangerous. And it leads right into the second killer of self-affirmation, which is external negativity.
This is all about your environment and the people you surround yourself with.
You simply cannot thrive no matter how strong your mindset is. If you're living or working in a psychological temperature that is constantly freezing, you cannot grow if you're surrounded by people who constantly criticize you.
Let's make this real.
Right. This could be a highly critical spouse who nitpicks every tiny thing you do around the house, making you feel incompetent in your own home. Or, very commonly, it could be overly successful, highly demanding parents who make you feel like nothing you achieve, no degree, no salary, no promotion, is ever quite good enough to earn their unconditional love.
If the voices outside your head are constantly telling you that you are falling short, eventually your internal monologue is going to adopt that exact same script. You'll start doing their job for them.
Environment plays a massive, often underestimated role. You absorb the psychological temperature of the room you're in.
But the third killer is perhaps the most insidious, the most pervasive, and the most destructive, especially in the modern, hyper-connected era. And that killer is comparison.
The ultimate trap. The famous quote says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." But looking at this research, it's more like an assassin of self-worth.
It truly is, because comparison creates a rigged game that you mathematically literally cannot win.
Let's explore the extremes of this.
Even if you are objectively spectacular in your life, let's say you're incredibly talented, highly educated, wealthy, and conventionally attractive, there's always, by the sheer law of probability, in a world of 8 billion people, someone who is better at something than you are.
Yes. Let's say you're the smartest kid in your small hometown. You build your entire identity on being the genius of the school. You feel great. Then you go to an Ivy League university and suddenly you're surrounded by valedictorians.
Instantly, you feel average or even stupid because your baseline for comparison shifted.
Or consider the modern digital landscape. You post a piece of art or a project you're really proud of online. You get 1,000 glowing, immensely positive comments. But there's that one negative comment. That one anonymous person who compares your work unfavorably to a famous artist.
Because of that ancient negativity bias we discussed, you will completely ignore the 1,000 praises and let that single comparison completely destroy your confidence for the rest of the week.
Comparison is so destructive because it strips away your subjective internal sense of self-worth and replaces it with an objective, external, and highly volatile metric.
And because the world is so vast and interconnected now through our screens, that external metric of perfection is always permanently out of reach. You're comparing your everyday reality to the mathematically anomalous top 0.001% of the human population.
Okay, I want to take a breath here, because we've painted a pretty bleak, intimidating picture of the human condition over the last bit of the show.
We have.
We're biologically wired by our ancestors to look for danger everywhere. Our idle minds turn against us the moment we try to relax. We obsessively hyper-focus on negative feedback, and modern society is constantly trying to strip away our self-affirmation through the highlight reels of our past failures, the criticism of others, and the infinite scroll of impossible comparisons.
It's a lot.
So, the ultimate question for the listener is, how do we fight back? How do we actually rewire a brain that seems so determined to make us miserable?
This is where the deep dive gets incredibly exciting, because the source material provides some deeply actionable and highly counterintuitive methods for hacking our own happiness.
Yes, this is where we transition from the diagnosis of the illness to the prescription for the cure. And the very first prescription we found in the literature challenges almost everything we are traditionally taught by society about building self-esteem.
It does.
I have to admit, when I first read this section of the research, I stopped in my tracks. It sounded entirely backward. The research suggests that to build genuinely unbreakable self-worth, you need to develop what psychologists refer to as unfounded confidence.
Meaning you need to praise yourself deeply and consistently without any objective evidence.
The advice is to literally look in the mirror and tell yourself that you are incredibly good looking, or that you are a brilliant thinker, or that you're a resilient powerhouse, even if, objectively speaking, you don't have the bank account or the symmetrical face to prove it.
I know exactly how that sounds. To the rational, analytical mind, it sounds like pure delusion. It sounds like toxic positivity or unchecked arrogance.
Exactly. Let me stop you right there and push back on this because I know the listener's thinking the same thing. Praising myself without evidence.
Hmm.
Isn't that just lying to myself?
Right.
If I am genuinely terrible at my job or if I keep making awful financial decisions, I shouldn't just look in the mirror and tell myself I'm a genius, right? How does being delusional help me? Doesn't that just make me oblivious to my flaws?
That is an excellent, necessary pushback, and it highlights the core nuance of this concept. Developing unfounded confidence is not about ignoring your skill deficits or refusing to improve. It is about fundamentally decoupling your right to exist and feel good about yourself from conditional external metrics.
Decoupling it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's look at the alternative to see why this is so vital. Confidence, based on evidence, what we call conditional confidence, is incredibly fragile. Let's construct a scenario. Let's say your entire self-esteem, your whole identity, is built on the empirical evidence that you are the richest, most successful person in your immediate social circle.
Okay, you feel great. You walk into every party feeling like a king.
But what happens the moment you attend a conference and you find yourself in an elevator with Warren Buffett?
Your confidence shatters instantly. It evaporates because the entire foundation it was built upon, the condition of being the wealthiest person in the room, has been removed.
Precisely. If your self-affirmation is conditional, if your internal monologue says, I am worthy only because I am the tallest, or I am worthy only because I got the promotion, or I am worthy only because my partner loves me, then you are constantly, terrifyingly at the mercy of circumstances changing.
Someone taller will eventually walk into the room.
Someone younger and hungrier will get the next promotion. Relationships can end. Conditional confidence is a house of cards built on shifting sands. But unfounded, subjective, unconditional confidence, it is utterly bulletproof.
Okay, when you explain conditional versus unconditional worth, it completely clicks. Unfounded confidence is bulletproof because it isn't competing with anyone else's reality.
Exactly.
If you decide, subjectively, just within the private sanctuary of your own mind, I am an awesome, valuable person, absolutely no one in the world can take that away from you. Because you didn't base it on a metric they can beat.
You didn't base it on your salary or your car. You just granted it to yourself by fiat. You only need to convince your own brain to feel the psychological benefits of happiness.
You do not need a notarized certificate from a panel of judges verifying that you are good-looking in order to feel good about how you look. You just have to grant yourself the permission to feel it.
It's about taking back the locus of control. You stop waiting for the chaotic, unpredictable external world to validate your existence, and you begin aggressively validating it internally.
Which leads perfectly into the next major strategy, which is all about how you frame and construct that internal narrative in real time. It's about consciously manipulating your vocabulary.
The words you use to describe a situation do not just describe your reality. They actually dictate the reality your brain perceives.
Let me give you a highly relatable scenario. You're at work, managing a massive project, and a critical vendor pulls out at the last minute. The project is falling apart.
The default biological reaction, driven by that panicked night watchman in the default mode network, is to say, I'm doomed. This is a complete disaster. It's all over. I'm going to be fired.
But the psychological research says you have to aggressively train yourself to intercept that exact thought mid-sentence and immediately say, out loud if you have to, okay, there must be a solution here.
This is a profound neurological intervention. It's about short-circuiting the biological panic response. When you use absolute catastrophic language like I'm doomed, your brain accepts that as a statement of finality.
The amygdala floods your system with stress hormones.
And crucially, your brain stops looking for answers. It starts preparing for the painful impact of failure. But when you intercept that and say, there must be a solution, you physically engage the prefrontal cortex, the logical, analytical, problem-solving center of the brain. You literally force your neural pathways to switch from emotional terror to strategic planning.
Yes, you're steering the ship away from the rocks. Another brilliant example from the sources. Let's say you lose some money on a bad investment, or you get scammed out of a few $100s. Instead of agonizing over it for months, frame it instantly as, I just dodged a bigger disaster.
I learned a valuable lesson now for a relatively small fee before I invested my entire life savings later.
It sounds remarkably simple, almost too simple, but it fundamentally alters your neurochemistry in that moment of crisis.
This psychological reframing connects beautifully to an ancient philosophical concept highlighted in our research. The famous story of Sai Wang lost his horse.
Oh, I know this one.
It's a classic Eastern parable about a farmer who loses his prize horse. All his neighbors say, "What a terrible disaster." But the farmer just says, "Perhaps." A week later, the horse returns, leading a whole herd of wild horses. The neighbors say, "What a great blessing." The farmer says, "Perhaps."
Then his son tries to ride one of the wild horses, falls, and breaks his leg. A disaster, say the neighbors. Perhaps, says the farmer.
Soon after, the army comes through, conscripting all able-bodied young men for a deadly war. But the son is spared because of his broken leg. The core, unshakable lesson of this philosophy is that the world rarely, if ever, goes according to our rigid, predefined plans.
Setbacks, detours, and unexpected losses aren't bizarre anomalies. They are the norm. They are the standard operating procedure of a chaotic universe.
If you walk through life expecting everything to go perfectly smoothly, every single bump in the road feels like a tragic personal injustice. It feels like the universe is attacking you.
But if you deeply accept that failure, sudden detours, and minor disasters are just the normal state of affairs, it completely prevents that mental collapse when things eventually go wrong. You just look at the flat tire or the lost client and think, right, a setback. That's just life doing its thing. What is the next logical step?
Which brings to mind the incredible historical analogy of Jack Ma that was detailed in the source material. When Jack Ma was starting out, he did not have a grand, flawless, friction-free plan to attend an elite global business school, secure top-tier venture capital, and become a billionaire.
His path was paved with failure.
He famously failed his university entrance exams multiple times. He went to a normal, unheralded teaching college. He faced dozens of rejections for basic jobs, including a rejection from KFC.
But those unexpected detours, those profound, embarrassing, apparent failures, were the exact necessary developmental steps that forged his resilience and led him to his ultimate destination of building an empire.
Exactly. If he had gotten exactly what he thought he wanted early on, if he had easily gotten that job at KFC or gotten to Harvard, he might never have developed the unique perspective required to build the massive tech empire he eventually did.
Life's detours are often not distractions from the path. They are the actual path. You just don't have the vantage point to see it yet.
So we've explored these powerful internal mindset shifts, developing unfounded, unconditional confidence and aggressively manipulating our vocabulary to reframe disasters.
But the research does not stop at the internal monologue. It also points to environmental and behavioral shifts that are incredibly effective at hacking our biology.
This brings us to a technique that involves changing how we physically process stress. We can think of it as achieving the God's eye view of a problem through writing.
I am an absolutely massive fan of this technique because it solves a very specific mechanical problem of the human mind. The human brain, for all its incredible processing power and complexity, it's actually terrible at processing most emotional problems internally. The working memory of the brain has a very limited capacity. If you're deeply stressed about a failing relationship or a massive career choice, and you just sit there on the couch thinking about it, your brain cannot hold all the variables at once.
It just creates a tangled, looping, chaotic mess of anxiety. You end up chewing on the exact same 3 terrifying thoughts for 4 hours straight without making a single inch of progress.
That is a perfect description of the cognitive bottleneck. The working memory gets overwhelmed.
I want you to imagine it like having 40 different high-bandwidth tabs open on a computer browser simultaneously. Eventually, the system simply freezes and crashes.
Yes, the system crashes. And the solution to this high-tech biological crash is remarkably beautifully low-tech. You just write it down.
Get a physical pen and a piece of paper.
The source material references the concepts found in the book Conversations with God and actually compares this psychological process to a programmer solving complex computer bugs. Have you ever noticed this phenomenon? The moment you sit down to explain a complex, frustrating problem to a colleague, or the moment you start typing out a long, desperate email asking for help, the solution suddenly becomes glaringly obvious to you before you even hit the send button.
It's a well-documented psychological phenomenon, often called rubber ducking in programming circles. When you write a problem down on paper, you fundamentally change how your brain interacts with it. You externalize it.
You literally move the data out of the emotional panic center of your brain and then physically put it onto a piece of paper in front of you.
In doing so, you elevate your consciousness to a higher dimension relative to the problem. You achieve that God's eye view. You are no longer trapped inside the chaotic storm of the problem. You are floating above it, looking down at it plotted out on a map.
You detach from the raw, blinding emotion and can suddenly apply pure, cold logic to solve it. It's basically a neurological magic trick for anxiety. You look at the terrifying problem once it's trapped on the paper and you say, oh, that's the whole thing. I just need to have a slightly uncomfortable 5-minute conversation with my boss on Tuesday. Why was I losing 3 nights of sleep over this?
And speaking of the power of detachment, that concept is the absolute core of the next major strategy we found: role-playing and ego detachment.
This is a profoundly powerful cognitive tool, especially when dealing with interpersonal conflict.
When you are faced with a crisis that feels deeply personal, a harsh criticism from a peer, a betrayal, a professional failure, it is incredibly difficult not to take it as a direct reflection of your own fundamental worth. The strategy here is to engage your imagination to create distance.
You actively imagine how someone you deeply admire would solve this exact same problem if they were in your shoes. Ask yourself, how would they handle this insult? How would they navigate this failure?
It's the classic mental pivot. What would the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius do in this staff meeting? Or what would my ridiculously calm, unflappable grandmother do in this traffic jam?
Exactly. And what this mental pivot accomplishes is vital. It creates a psychological buffer zone. It separates you, your fragile ego, from the problem at hand. It allows you to temporarily borrow their perceived competence, their emotional distance, and apply it to your situation.
Furthermore, our sources dive deeply into Eastern philosophy to illustrate this, specifically quoting the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu, "Be like water." This is not just poetic imagery, it is profound tactical advice for dealing with the external negativity we discussed earlier.
Let's sit with that philosophical weight for a moment. Water doesn't resist the rock in the stream. It just flows around it. It doesn't get angry at the obstacle.
Precisely. When people criticize you, attack you, or direct their anger at you, you must cultivate the wisdom to recognize that they're almost always attacking a specific problem, a specific action, or honestly, they're just aggressively projecting their own unhealed insecurities onto you.
They are rarely attacking you at your very core as a human being, because frankly, they don't truly know your core.
If you can successfully detach your ego from the issue, if you can embody that philosophy and be like water, the criticism just passes right through you. It doesn't shatter your identity because your core identity was never tied to the specific thing being criticized in the first place.
That is such a spectacularly liberating way to move through the world. Unhooking your ego from the opinions of others? But what if the immense pressure isn't coming from external criticism? What if the pressure is coming entirely from your own internal expectations?
That brings us to another crucial shift: lowering the baseline.
I genuinely think this is where so many of us stumble the hardest in modern society. We have lost all sense of rational relativity when it comes to our standards for success.
Relativity is the lens through which we view our entire existence. Let me use a highly illustrative physical example drawn directly from the text to explain this. Imagine you are 1.6 meters tall. If you decide, arbitrarily, that the absolute non-negotiable standard for a normal, acceptable human height is 1.8 meters, you are going to spend your entire life feeling short, inadequate, physically flawed, and miserable.
You will constantly feel like you are failing at existing.
But the mathematical and emotional reality changes entirely if you simply shift the baseline. If you make yourself your exact height of 1.6 meters, the baseline standard of normality, then you are perfectly fine and the other person is just unusually tall.
It sounds almost childishly simplistic when applied to physical height, but it perfectly highlights a massive, pervasive cognitive error we make daily regarding our careers, our wealth, and our happiness. We constantly, subconsciously adopt extreme external baselines as our definition of normal.
Yes. You sit on your couch, you log onto social media, and the algorithm shows you a 22-year-old tech billionaire vacationing on a mega yacht in the Mediterranean. And suddenly, instantaneously, your totally respectable, comfortable, hardworking life feels like an absolute humiliating failure.
You are committing the ultimate psychological error. You are comparing your behind-the-scenes, mundane, everyday reality to the highly curated, mathematically anomalous, heavily edited highlight reel of a complete stranger.
You have to stop doing this to yourself. You have to aggressively lower the baseline back down to reality. Make your own past progress the only standard.
Ask yourself, am I slightly wiser, slightly kinder, or slightly more skilled than I was yesterday?
Yes.
Then you are succeeding. You are winning the only game that actually exists.
And alongside lowering that baseline of expectation to protect our peace, we must also address a very real biological need for novelty to keep the brain engaged. This is another area where modern life betrays us. Doing the exact same routine day in and day out, down to the minute, actually deeply drains your self-affirmation and your capacity for joy.
Wait, really? Let's unpack that because that feels counter to a lot of modern productivity advice. Why does routine drain self-worth? I thought building strict daily routines was supposed to be the ultimate key to success and mental stability.
Routines are undeniably efficient for getting tasks done, but extreme, unbroken rigidity over long periods leads to severe stagnation in the brain. The human brain thrives on a process called neuroplasticity, the forming of new neural connections and pathways.
Okay.
I want you to imagine neuroplasticity like walking through a dense, overgrown forest. If you walk the exact same paved, concrete path every single day, the surrounding forest grows thick and the path becomes a deep, inescapable rut. Your brain goes entirely on autopilot.
It stops actively engaging with the world around it because it already knows exactly what is going to happen next.
Exactly. This profound lack of engagement can subtly manifest as a creeping depressive state, a loss of motivation, or that hollow feeling of, is this really all there is to life? To combat this rut, you don't need to do something drastic like quit your job, sell all your possessions, and move to a monastery in a new country.
You just need to intentionally inject tiny, manageable variations into your daily existence to force the brain to wake up.
Yes, tiny variations.
You don't have to overhaul your life, you just have to gently shock the system. You take a completely different bus route to work just to see different buildings. You decide to cook something completely out of your comfort zone for breakfast instead of eating your usual toast.
If you normally wake up at 8 a.m., try setting the alarm for 5 a.m., just one single day a week.
Yeah.
Go outside and experience the bizarre, silent tranquility of the early morning while the rest of the world is asleep.
These tiny low-stakes shocks to the system force your brain to wake up, pay attention, hack a new path through the forest, and process new environmental information. It breaks the hypnotic spell of the autopilot and crucially reminds your subconscious that you still have active agency and choice in your life.
It re-engages the conscious, present mind, which physically pulls you out of that dangerous, anxiety-producing default mode network we discussed at the very beginning of the hour.
Okay, so we've covered deep internal mindset shifts, we've covered cognitive reframing, and we've covered behavioral variations. But what about the moments when you are right in the thick of a crisis? What about when the stress is already completely overwhelming you? Your heart is pounding, your mind is spiraling out of control, and you need immediate physical relief right now.
We promised the listeners science-backed methods, and our sources point to an absolutely fascinating, highly specific 2016 study from the University of Sussex.
It is a study entirely dedicated to finding the ultimate mathematically proven stress reliever.
This study is a truly fantastic piece of empirical research
Yeah.
because it didn't just ask people what they like doing. It tested the exact common methods people instinctively use to try and calm down, and it scientifically ranked them by measuring their actual neurological and physiological effectiveness in reducing heart rate and muscle tension.
I was looking at the data from this Sussex study, and what really caught my eye wasn't just what worked best, but what didn't work as well as we all think it does. Let's look at this data slowly. When people feel overwhelmed by stress, a huge portion of the population instinctively turns to video games. They want to shoot some digital zombies or race high-speed cars to blow off steam and escape their reality. But the physiological data found that playing video games only reduces stress by about 21%.
It was actually the least effective method on the entire list.
Why is that?
The reason for that low effectiveness is biological. While video games do provide a distraction from your specific worry, they still require a remarkably high cognitive load to play. Furthermore, the action on the screen often triggers the exact same adrenaline spikes and fight or flight responses in your nervous system that you're trying to escape from.
Right. You are trading one source of anxiety for a digital one. Okay, next up on the list, taking a walk, getting outside, breathing fresh air, moving your body. The study found this reduces stress by 42%. That is a very solid, respectable reduction. But we can do better.
How about sitting down with a warm cup of black tea?
That simple act comes in at a 54% reduction in physiological stress.
That is where we see the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. To give you an analogy, the parasympathetic nervous system is essentially your body's built-in biological brake pedal.
When a stressor hits the gas pedal, flooding your engine with cortisol and adrenaline, The comforting ritual, the warmth of the tea, and the deliberate slowing down physically forces your foot onto that brake pedal, commanding the heart rate to slow down and the muscles to unclench.
That makes perfect sense. You are physically forcing the body to calm down. Following the tea, we have listening to music. You put on your favorite calming acoustic playlist, close your eyes, and the data shows a massive 61% reduction in stress.
That is excellent, but it is still not the ultimate winner.
No, it is not. The winner, according to the rigorous testing by the University of Sussex researchers, outperformed absolutely everything else on the list by a highly significant margin.
The ultimate empirically proven stress reliever is reading. Reading reduced stress by a massive, staggering 68%. And here is the craziest, most actionable part of the entire study. It achieved this profound physiological reduction in just 6 minutes.
6 minutes of reading a book lowered heart rates and eased muscle tension more rapidly and effectively than any other activity tested.
But we absolutely must clarify the parameters of this finding because not all reading is created equal when it comes to stress relief. The rules of reading for the purpose of de-stressing are highly specific.
Yes, please clarify this because I can guarantee that trying to read a densely packed 800-page academic manual on corporate tax law is not going to reduce anyone's stress. It might actually cause a panic attack.
Exactly. The study indicates that simple, engaging, entertaining fiction is the optimal choice. You want a narrative that effortlessly allows your brain to step completely out of your own stressful reality and immerse itself in another constructed world.
The prose shouldn't be overly complex, and the subject matter shouldn't be triggering or intensely grim. You are looking for a cognitive vacation.
Just a genuinely good, engaging story that pulls you in. But this brings up a massive critical point from the research, a warning for how we consume media in the modern age. I can hear a lot of people thinking right now, well, reading a fiction book is just passively consuming a story, so I'll just achieve the exact same effect by lying on the couch and watching an action movie, or binge-watching a high-drama TV show. It's the exact same mechanism, right?
It is neurologically the exact opposite mechanism.
Yeah.
This is a crucial warning. Do not use modern movies or intense television to de-stress if your nervous system is already overwhelmed. Modern cinematic media is fundamentally scientifically engineered for intense, relentless sensory stimulation.
The rapid camera cuts every 2 seconds, the jarringly loud sound effects, the booming, sweeping musical scores. They are deliberately designed to hijack your visual and auditory processing centers to keep you glued to the screen.
They are literal adrenaline machines designed to bypass your logical brain.
Yes, they are. While a movie might successfully distract your conscious mind from your specific worry about your mortgage, watching a high-octane film actually induces deep physical tension and a continuous stress response in the body. Your heart rate variability often decreases, and your muscles tense up in sympathy with the action on screen.
Reading a physical book, on the other hand, is an entirely self-paced activity.
Yeah.
You control the speed of the narrative input. There is no flashing strobe light. There is no sudden, deafening explosion through surround sound speakers.
It allows for a peaceful, controlled, gentle release of cognitive tension. Your brain is doing the work of creating the imagery, but it does so at a pace and intensity that it is perfectly comfortable with.
That physiological distinction is so profoundly important for people to understand. 6 minutes of sitting quietly with a paperback novel versus 6 minutes of sensory assault from a chaotic action movie.
One physically heals the bruised brain and engages the brake pedal, while the other just exhausts an already tired engine even further.
I want to take a deep breath here and slowly recap the incredible, dense journey we have been on together over the last hour.
Let's do it.
We started by confronting a harsh, unyielding reality. We are biologically wired by millions of years of brutal evolution to constantly look for danger, not joy. When we finally try to just sit still and do nothing, our idle minds betray us, activating the default mode network to start predicting absolute disasters.
On top of that ancient programming, our modern, hyper-connected society constantly tries to strip away our baseline self-affirmation by weaponizing our past failures, amplifying external criticism, and trapping us in an infinite scroll of unrealistic, unwinnable comparisons.
It is a truly formidable, intimidating combination. We are fighting an alliance of ancient evolutionary biology and modern psychological warfare, working simultaneously against our peace of mind.
And this is the massive, empowering, but that we have spent the entire hour proving with data. You are not helpless. You have the tools to actually hack your own biology.
You can fight back by consciously choosing to adopt unfounded, bulletproof confidence that relies on absolutely no external validation.
You can fight back by radically, aggressively reframing your daily vocabulary so that every catastrophic failure is instantly categorized as just a normal detour. You can step out of your paralyzing routine by taking a different route to work to stimulate your brain's neuroplasticity.
You can write your problems down to achieve a God's eye view. You can detach your ego from criticism by being like water. And when all else fails and the panic sets in, you can pick up a good fiction book for exactly 6 minutes to immediately drop your physiological stress levels by almost 70%.
These are not just nice philosophical ideas to ponder, they are literal, measurable physiological interventions that change the chemistry of your brain. But as we wrap this up, we must also ground this entire conversation in realistic, compassionate expectations.
I completely agree. I want to talk directly to you, the listener, right now as we close out. Building these new cognitive habits, changing the fundamental way you speak to yourself in the mirror, catching yourself before you spiral into a pit of negative social media comparison, forcing yourself to pick up a book instead of your phone. It takes serious time.
The psychological research is very clear that forming a new, deeply ingrained neural habit doesn't just happen overnight because you listen to a 1-hour discussion. Studies show it can take anywhere from 18 days to well over 200 days of consistent repetition for a new behavior to become an automatic, subconscious response.
So you must extend grace and patience to yourself. The goal of implementing these strategies is progress, not absolute perfection.
Exactly. You do not have to be happy 100% of the time. In fact, as we established in the very first 10 minutes, expecting to be happy all the time is biologically impossible and will only make you more miserable.
You will still feel sad. You will still feel spikes of anxiety. You will absolutely still have bad days where everything goes wrong.
But the crucial difference now is that you possess the actual tools to pull yourself out of the dark. You are no longer a passive passenger at the mercy of your default mode network. You are firmly in the driver's seat of your own mind.
As we conclude, I think we should leave our listener with one final, deeply philosophical concept to mull over. Something that bridges the ancient primitive biology we started with and the advanced modern psychological tools we just discussed.
I love that idea. Give us something heavy to think about as we go about our day.
Consider the profound magnitude of this paradox. If our human brains were purely, strictly evolved to prioritize survival, above all else, operating entirely through fear, hypervigilance, and negativity, if that is our true, unchangeable biological factory setting. But our modern complex life demands that we seek happiness, fulfillment, and deep self-actualization. Are we, by using these tools, essentially trying to consciously guide our own evolution?
Think about the weight of that.
The next time you stand in front of the bathroom mirror and intentionally force yourself to smile, or force yourself to say, I am a capable, worthy human being for absolutely no objective reason whatsoever, ask yourself a question. Are you just trying to slightly improve your mood for the afternoon? Or are you, in that very specific quiet moment, using the sheer force of your conscious will to override millions of years of human programming in real time?
Wow. Overriding millions of years of survival evolution with a single, deliberate, conscious thought. That is a truly powerful, awe-inspiring place to leave it. Sit with that thought, try out the biological hacks we discussed, be patient with your progress, and we will see you on the next deep dive.